Welcome back to the podcast. The Formula One circuit has arrived at the iconic Silverstone circuit for the 2026 British Grand Prix, one of the most historic and exciting races on the calendar. With a sprint weekend format, teams had just 1 hour of practice to dial in their cars before the competitive sessions began, meaning every lap was crucial. And what a way to kick off the weekend! Home favorite Lewis Hamilton delighted the British crowd by putting his Ferrari on top of the timesheets, while championship leader Kimi Antonelli and teammate Charles Leclerc showed that the battle at the front is tighter than ever. From surprise performances to early mistakes and plenty of clues about who's fast, FP1 gave its fascinating first look at what should promise to be an action-packed weekend. Let's dive into everything that happened in the only practice session of the 2026 British Grand Prix. Hamilton sends a Silverstone statement. The British Grand Prix weekend got underway with just one practice session before sprint qualifying, making every lap count. And it was Lewis Hamilton who stole the spotlight. The Ferrari driver topped the timesheet with a blistering 129.26 seconds, finishing over 2 tenths clear of championship leader Kimi Antonelli and nearly 6 tenths ahead of teammate Charles Leclerc. With only 60 minutes available, teams wasted no time hitting the track. Hamilton led the queue out of the pits and immediately looked comfortable around his home circuit, where he's chasing a historic 10th Silverstone victory. Mercedes showed strong early pace, but Hamilton kept finding more speed as the session progressed. Kimi Antonelli continued his impressive rookie campaign by finishing second despite early complaints about energy deployment. Once those issues were resolved, the Mercedes driver looked genuinely competitive and reinforced why he's leading the championship. Ferrari enjoyed an excellent session overall, with Charles Leclerc securing third, while George Russell placed fourth for Mercedes. Oscar Piastri completed the top 5 for McLaren, although his session included a dramatic spin at Beckett's after losing the rear of the car. Fortunately, he avoided the barriers and escaped without damage. Red Bull also showed promising speed, with Max Verstappen finishing 6th ahead of Lando Norris, who endured a frustrating session featuring a deleted lap for track limits and another aborted run. Isaac Hadjar impressed once again in 8th, while Nico Hülkenberg and Liam Lawson round out the top 10. With sprint qualifying coming later in the day and no additional practice, Hamilton's performance sends a strong message. Ferrari appears to have genuine pace at Silverstone. Mercedes remains firmly in the fight, and the stage is set for what could be a thrilling sprint weekend. Sprint qualifying at Silverstone had everything Formula One fans could ask for. Intense competition, razor-thin margins, and a dream result for the home crowd. Lewis Hamilton continued his incredible Friday form by securing sprint pole for the British Grand Prix, beating championship leader Kimi Antonelli by just 100th of a second in one of the closest qualifying sessions of the season. Let's break down all 3 stages of sprint qualifying. SQ1. With only one practice session before qualifying, every driver headed into SQ1 with limited data and just 2 realistic chances to set a competitive lap on the mandatory medium tires. Early on, Isaac Hadjar briefly topped the timing screens, but Hamilton quickly responded with a superb lap of a 129.273 seconds to reclaim first place. Ferrari looked immediately comfortable around Silverstone, while Charles Leclerc backed up the pace by finishing second in the opening segment. Mercedes weren't quite as convincing. George Russell struggled with an untidy lap that left him 5th, while Antonelli safely progressed in 8th. McLaren also made it through despite Lando Norris carrying minor damage after the opening session. The biggest heartbreak belonged to Ollie Bearman, who missed advantage to SQ2 by just 100th of a second. Joining him on the sidelines were Esteban Ocon, Sergio Perez, Valtteri Bottas, Fernando Alonso, and Lance Stroll, as Aston Martin endured another disappointing qualifying performance. SQ2. Hamilton showed that his SQ1 pace was no fluke. The Ferrari driver lowered the benchmark to a 1:28.747 seconds, once again leading Antonelli and teammate Leclerc. Behind them, the midfield battle became incredibly competitive. Liam Lawson produced an outstanding lap to briefly jump into fourth, while teammate Arvid Lindblad also reached the top 10, giving Racing Bulls both cars a shot at sprint pole. Russell continued to battle an uncooperative Mercedes and only managed 7th despite improving on the final run. Lando Norris also advantaged despite carrying minor car damage, while Max Verstappen quietly secured his place in the final shootout. Missing out on SQ3 were Pierre Gasly, Gabriel Bortoleto, Nico Hülkenberg, Franco Colapinto, Carlos Sainz, and Alex Albon. SQ3. The final 10-minute session became a single-lap showdown, as every driver switched to the soft tires. McLaren set the early benchmark before Antonelli delivered what looked like a pole-winning lap with a stunning 1 minute 28.387 seconds. But then came Lewis Hamilton. The 7-time world champion produced one final magical lap around Silverstone, stopping the clock at 1:28.376. Just 11 thousandths of a second faster than Antonelli, to send the home crowd into celebration and secure sprint pole for Ferrari. Max Verstappen qualified third, ahead of Charles Leclerc, while George Russell recovered to fifth despite never looking completely comfortable throughout the session. McLaren settled for sixth and seventh with Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, followed by Isaac Hadjar, Liam Lawson, and Arvid Lindblad, caping another impressive qualifying performance for Racing Bulls. Hamilton had been the fastest driver in free practice, SQ1, SQ2, and finally SQ3, completing a flawless Friday at Silverstone. With Ferrari showing general pace, Mercedes led by Antonelli only a fraction behind, and Verstappen waiting to capitalize on any opportunity. The stage is perfectly set for an exciting sprint race before Sunday's British Grand Prix. Antonelli takes control at Silverstone. The first race of the British Grand Prix weekend delivered exactly what fans were hoping for. Wheel-to-wheel battles, overtakes, drama, and a new sprint winner. Championship leader Kimi Antonelli claimed his first ever Formula One sprint victory after overtaking Lewis Hamilton midway through the race and driving away to a commanding win at Silverstone. Starting from sprint pole, Hamilton made a perfect getaway and aggressively defended into turn 1, forcing Antonelli to the inside to keep the lead. The Ferrari driver looked determined to convert pole into victory, but the Mercedes youngster never let him escape. Behind them, the opening laps were packed with action. Max Verstappen lost ground of the starts, as both McLarens launched brilliantly, while George Russell and Lando Norris traded positions in a fierce battle for the podium places. Charles Leclerc also joined through the fight as the top 6 ran nose to tail. Further back, Fernando Alonso's race quietly unraveled after contact with Sergio Perez sent Aston Martin into a spin. Perez was handed a 10-second time penalty for causing the collision, ending any chance of a strong result for Cadillac. At the front, Hamilton managed to keep Antonelli behind for the opening 7 laps, but everyone knew the Mercedes driver was simply waiting for the right opportunity. The moment came on lap 8. Using the extra electrical boost down the hanger straight, Antonelli pulled alongside Hamilton and completed a clean, decisive overtake into Stowe corner. Once he grabbed the lead, the championship leader immediately began pulling away, showing superior pace over the closing laps. Behind them, the fight for third remained intense. Lando Norris held off constant pressure from George Russell, to secure another sprint podium for McLaren, where Russell settled for fourth after entertaining battle with Verstappen. Leclerc capitalized on Verstappen's struggles in the second half of the race to finish fifth, leaving the Red Bull driver sixth. Oscar Piastri crossed the line seventh, while Liam Lawson secured the final sprint point in eighth after a defensive drive against Isaac Hadjar. However, Lawson's late move under braking was noted by the stewards and came under post-race investigations. Antonelli crossed the finish line 2.7 seconds clear of Hamilton, taking his maiden sprint victory and adding another 8 championship points to his title campaign. Hamilton had to settle for second despite leading nearly half the race, while Lando Norris completed the podium in front of his home fans. The sprint also reinforced what we've seen all weekend. Ferrari has the pace to challenge, Mercedes has a championship leader full of confidence, and McLaren remains consistently in the fight. And Red Bull still has work to do before Sunday's Grand Prix. With qualifying and the main race still to come, the battle for victory at Silverstone is far from over. After an exciting sprint race earlier in the day, all eyes turned to the most important qualifying session of the weekend, with Ferrari looking fast, Mercedes confident, and Red Bull searching for answers. The battle for pole position promised to be one of the closest of the season. When the dust settled, it was championship leader Kimi Antonelli who delivered once again, securing his fifth pole position of the year with a stunning lap of 1:28.111 seconds. The young Mercedes driver edged out Ferrari's Charles Leclerc by a tenth of a second, while Lewis Hamilton completed the top 3 in front of the adoring home crowd. Let's break down how all 3 qualifying sessions unfolded. Q1. The opening session immediately threw out drama. Ferrari looked incredible strong from the start, with Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton setting their early benchmark, while the windy Silverstone conditions caught several drivers by surprise. The biggest scare came from George Russell, who locked up at Le Fields, slid through the gravel and lightly hit the barriers with the front wing. Mercedes mechanics worked quickly to replace the damaged nose, allowing Russell to return to the circuit and comfortable advance. Meanwhile, Isaac Hadjar continued his impressive weekend by going fastest with a 1:29.276 seconds ahead of Liam Lawson and Max Verstappen in an encouraging showing for Red Bull and Racing Bulls. At the other end of the grid, Franco Colapinto's trip through the gravel at the Becketts brought out yellow flags, while Esteban Ocon, Valtteri Bottas, Colapinto, Sergio Perez, Lance Stroll, and Fernando Alonso were all eliminated in Q1. Q2, the second session belonged to Hamilton early on. The Ferrari driver became the first man to break into the 1:28s with a lap of 1:28.864 seconds, while teammate Leclerc and Russell remained close behind. Antonelli briefly found himself in trouble after having his first lap deleted for exceeding track limits, but the Mercedes driver responded like a championship leader, producing an outstanding lap of 1:28.493 seconds to jump back to the top of the timesheet. McLaren endured another difficult qualifying session. Both Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri found themselves hovering near the elimination zone before improving just enough to scrape into SQ3. Red Bull also looked uncomfortable throughout the session. Verstappen repeatedly complained over team radio that the car wasn't responding properly, even calling it a disaster. After another frustrating run, eliminated in Q2 were Gabriel Bortoleto, Pierre Gasly, Nico Hulkenberg, Ollie Behrman, Carlos Sainz, and Alex Albon. Q3. The final 12-minute shootout came down to Mercedes versus Ferrari. Hamilton initially grabbed provisional pole, but Antonelli immediately responded with a brilliant 128.385 on the opening runs, putting himself ahead of teammate Russell and both Ferraris. Everything came down to the final lap. Antonelli improved once again, producing an almost perfect lap of a 128.111 to strengthen his grip on pole position. Leclerc found extra time on his final attempt and moved into second, but still finished 1/10 of a second short of the Mercedes. Hamilton couldn't improve enough to challenge his teammate and settled for third, while Russell dropped to fourth after failing to match Antonelli's pace. Isaac Hadjar continued one of the standout performances of the weekend by qualifying fifth ahead of Lando Norris. Verstappen could only manage seventh after struggling with the balance of the Red Bull throughout the session, while Oscar Piastri finished eighth. Racing Bulls completed an outstanding afternoon with both Arvid Lindblad and Liam Lawson qualifying inside the top 10, highlighting the team's impressive pace around Silverstone. Antonelli's pole position gaped another remarkable performance from the championship leader. After winning the sprint earlier in the day, Mercedes now holds the best starting position for Sunday's Grand Prix, but Ferrari remains firmly in the fight with both Leclerc and Hamilton lining up directly behind, settling the stage for a fascinating battle into Turn 1 at Silverstone. Leclerc triumphs at Silverstone delivers more drama. The 2026 British Grand Prix had everything: an explosive start, strategy battles, penalties, mechanical heartbreak, a late safety car, and a Ferrari victory that few could have predicted after Saturday. Charles Leclerc mastered the chaos to claim his ninth Formula One victory, leading home George Russell and Lewis Hamilton, after championship leader Kimi Antonelli saw what looked like a certain podium disappear because of a mechanical failure. Here's how an unforgettable afternoon unfolded. A perfect Ferrari start. Pole sister Kimi Antonelli looked ready to convert his qualifying performance into another victory, but Charles Leclerc had other ideas. When the lights went out, the Ferrari driver launched brilliantly from second on the grid, sweeping past Antonelli in turn 1. Lewis Hamilton also made a fantastic getaway, moving into second and giving Ferrari an early 1-2 as Antonelli dropped to third. Behind them, George Russell held fourth, while Max Verstappen and Isaac Hadjar battled fiercely. Further back, Oscar Piastri suffered front wing damage after contact with Liam Lawson and was forced to pit at the end of the opening lap, effectively ending his hopes of scoring big points. There was also early drama involving Alex Albon and Ollie Bearman after contact sent Bearman into a spin, with Albon later receiving a 10-second penalty. Hamilton penalized, Antonelli fights back. Leclerc immediately began building a gap, while Hamilton came under pressure from Antonelli. Things became even more complicated for Ferrari when Hamilton was handed a 5-second penalty for a false start, putting his podium hopes in danger despite running second on the road. Antonelli wasted little time capitalizing, making a clean move around the outside of Copse and on lap 11 to reclaim second place and became chasing Leclerc. At that stage, it looked like the race would become another duel between Ferrari and Mercedes. Strategy brings new battles. As the pit stops phase began, Verstappen was one of the first front runners to switch to hard tires, trying to undercut the Mercedes and Ferraris. Hamilton served his 5-second penalty during his stop before rejoining behind Russell, setting up one of the race's most entertaining battles. The two British drivers traded positions multiple times through Brooklands and Copse, giving the Silverstone crowd plenty to cheer about. Meanwhile, Antonelli stayed out much longer than his rivals, inheriting the race lead before finally making his stop on lap 36. He rejoined in second place, around 7 seconds behind Leclerc, but his fresher tires and enough pace to mount a serious challenge. Everything pointed toward a thrilling finish. Antonelli's race falls apart. Then came the turning point of the Grand Prix. On lap 41, Antonelli suddenly reported that something on the car was broken. Mercedes quickly diagnosed that what appeared to be a failure of the left front wheel shield, several affecting the car's handling. Antonelli was forced into the pits, where the team changed tires, inspected the front wing, and eventually removed the damaged components. The lengthy repairs dropped the championship leader from second all the way down the order. To make matters worse, Antonelli later received a 5-second penalty for exceeding track limits, completing a miserable end to what had looked like another outstanding weekend. Late safety car changes the podium. As Leclerc comfortably controlled the race, another dramatic moment unfolded. On lap 48, Max Verstappen lost control at Stowe corner and crashed into the gravel, bringing out the safety car. Most of the leaders immediately pitted for fresh tires, but George Russell stayed out. That strategy call proved crucial. By remaining on track, Russell jumped ahead of Hamilton into second place, while Leclerc comfortably retained the lead, with Verstappen's car taking time to recover. The safety car remained on track until the finish, meaning the race ended under yellow conditions. Leclerc ends Ferrari's tough run. Charles Leclerc crossed the finish line to secure a brilliant victory, his 9th career Formula One win, and his first ever at Silverstone. George Russell's clever strategy earned Mercedes second place, while Lewis Hamilton recovered from his false start penalty to complete a double podium for Ferrari. Although Hamilton was investigated after the race for a yellow flag infringement, the stewards issued only a reprimand, allowing him to keep third position. Lando Norris finished fourth for McLaren, while Isaac Hadjar delivered another impressive performance in fifth. Racing Bulls celebrated a double points finish, with Liam Lawson and Arvid Lindblad in sixth and seventh. Gabriel Bortoleto scored valuable points for Audi in 8th, and Alpine rounded out the top 10 with Franco Colapinto and Pierre Gasly. Antonelli's mechanical failure ultimately left him classified only 6th after his penalty, costing him a huge haul of championship points. Despite an almost perfect weekend up to that moment, the Mercedes driver left Silverstone empty-handed, while Leclerc's victory at Ferrari's double podium made this one of the biggest turning points of the 2026 Formula One season. Top 5 Drivers' Championship: Antonelli 179 points, Russell 154 points, Hamilton 147 points, Leclerc 108 points, and Norris 87 points. Top 5 Constructors' Championship: Mercedes 333 points, Ferrari 255 points, McLaren 179 points, Red Bull 128 points, and Alpine 60 points. And that wraps up an unforgettable British Grand Prix weekend. From Lewis Hamilton's incredible pace in practice and sprint qualifying to Kimi Antonelli's dominant sprint victory, and finally Charles Leclerc's dramatic triumph on Sunday, Silverstone delivered everything Formula One fans could ask for. But the season is far from over. After a short weekend break, Formula One heads to one of the most legendary circuits on the calendar, Spa-Francorchamps, for the Belgian Grand Prix, taking place on July 7th to July 19th, with the championship battle tightening and momentum constantly shifting. Expect another action-packed weekend full of surprises. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you're following so you never miss the latest race recaps, breaking F1 news, predictions, and behind-the-scenes stories throughout the season. Follow us on TikTok around the world in 24 tracks for quick race highlights and F1 content, on Instagram at Empowered Paddock for inclusive updates, race weekend coverage, and behind-the-scenes posts, and subscribe on YouTube, Lights Out with Hannah, for full race reviews, discussions, and Formula One content. And you don't forget to follow the Pit Wall Pod on Spotify so every new episode is waiting for you after each Grand Prix. Thanks for listening, enjoy the break, and we'll see you after Spa for another incredible Formula One weekend. Until next time, keep your foot on the throttle and we'll catch you at the next Lights Out.